I hate to inform you, but Riot Games has been up to their usual shenanigans again.
You know what? The worst thing about this one, Monty, is this might actually be one of the worst fan responses in years. Because I actually feel like the last few years, generally, fans have done a decent job of sort of combating some of the Riot nonsense and figuring out, like, you know, when they're talking shit or when the Elsa's Commission not doing anything. Bro, you know the most disturbing thing about this? I know that obviously you have to seed this topic that they're basically killing the LPL English broadcasting. People don't know. Like, look, you can sort of say that the writing was on the wall when you consider how they like downsized it over the years, didn't invite anyone in fucking Worlds, and then eventually it was like Nymera just going like, I'll turn it on and do some of your official matches in the best league in the world so someone's watching the game. You can already sort of tell it was going a bad way. But the problem I always had was you would have thought just for vanity alone, you'd never give up like a major like English language broadcast on like, remember this team, Monty, if Faker doesn't do all that shit, the news of this offseason is, yeah, you know, the reason that won Worlds, you can't watch it as someone who speaks English. Like, what? So they've gone to a core stream only model, right? This is where I feel so disappointed, Monty, because the amount of people I've seen who were sort of like, who gives a fuck? I prefer core streams anyway. Or probably the worst take. I actually think this is one of the worst takes I've ever seen, Monty, is the one that goes, because you know last season, Dom was like, maybe I'll run an LPL broadcast. They take that as if like, this is where you know people who don't contribute are just leeches, Monty. They took Dom potentially spitballing that idea as like, he should just run the broadcast. Like, yeah, Dom, a guy who used to just play the game, who Mark Merrill was like, glad you have a game to make a career of. He should himself foot the bill to run a broadcast for you, which, are you ready? This is the part that blows my mind, Monty. Would compete with his own core stream, the main and only source of his income, you morons. Like, why would he? That's the obvious question. You won't pay to watch it. Most of you won't even watch it. Riot won't pay to fund it. But Dom should just go, are you ready? You know the one that kills me inside, Monty? I've seen people go, just get sponsors. If just get sponsors was a thing, the Riot broadcast would still be around, wouldn't it? As far as I can tell, Monty, we're the only people who can check slots. Just get sponsors. Joke there being, we can't get any of that filthy fucking investment money. Therefore, we, you know, either side, you get fucked on one end. You either get the investment money or no sponsors, or you all sponsor, no investment. So, but I actually think, to start there, Monty, I think it would be incredibly unreasonable and insanely charitable from Dom if he decided to run his own LPL stream. Like, I don't expect him to do that at all, man. I thought it was a cool idea before because it showed me how much he loves the league, but like, I definitely don't expect him to do that. Why the fuck should he?
I mean, it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, which is obviously a lot to an individual streamer. Well, some individual streamers, but it's not a lot to Riot Games. And I think that's what's the disappointing thing. And I think we do need to go back and talk about what happened with the LPL English broadcast historically, because the reason why people are mad is because Riot has completely fucked this up once again. And what happened is we have to rewind all the way to the beginning of the LPL in China and where it started, because in like the early 20 teens, so we're talking like 2014 here, it was actually a community run effort called LPL EN. The stream was twitch.tv.
It was quite literally people like Kelsey Moser running it and then getting like Froscore and all them people to do the casts. Like, yeah, it was completely computer run. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I don't think they just reached out to someone in the LPL, just got the feeds. Basically, that was about it. There was no Riot involvement as far as I know, right?
Yeah, basically they had themselves to go out and make the contacts, get the feeds. Riot had no interest, Tencent had no interest in running this. And so what happened was that there were a lot of up-and-coming English language casters or people within the scene. Remember, I mean, the list of people that has come from the LPL English stream over the years is absolutely immense. It has been the primary source of League of Legends broadcast talent, which is one of the biggest deals with shutting it down. Because regardless of whether you think anybody watched it, because people are saying, Thorin, well, I didn't watch the English LPL stream. I was only watching the co-casters like Cadril and Dom. You were watching it because that English broadcast was piped into your fucking ears. Do you think co-streamers talk all the time? They don't. They would lose their voice if they were co-streaming for 12 hours a day, every day. They are reaction content. Maybe good reaction content. I'm not saying that pejoratively or negatively, but what I am saying is that they are at its core reaction content, which means there has to be content to exist first. And while they've said, oh, we are going to get the clean feeds in, this is an announcement that is inherently going to make the co-streams that you watch worse. It is. especially because many of the LPL casters were very good casters. Also, the world's stupidest take that I hear, which is like, the LPL casters are shit. Actually, my personal opinion is that some of those LPL casters were among the best casters in League of Legends.
Broadcasts. Yeah,
so what happened was it started as a community run effort. Then it got taken over, right, and professionalized. And this was all run by Tencent out of China, okay? So then we get the era where people are actually that's not true. We got the era where the Riot was broadcasting it out of Australia. So there was a studio in Australia where they had the OPL before they killed the OPL, which was the Australian Professional League.
They just did both from the studio, right?
Yes, they did OPL and LPL from that studio. That's where people like Atlas came from, guys.
Wasn't that even where Spawn came from at one point in time?
Yes.
Was he just like working in the league? I think loads. That's the other thing, as you're hinting at. The other thing that's mental is they're doing that thing, Monty, where it's like, but well, I need the LPL. I've got like Atlas and Dagda and Raz and it's like, no, for the LPL, you moron. They wouldn't exist as casters in other regions if they didn't get their start with the LPL. You're doing my engine, guys, please.
How about Papa Smithy? How about pastry time? You know, where the fuck, Emily Rand, even if she wasn't casting, was known for following the Chinese League of Legends scene back in the day, which again would not have really been possible without English language support or English language broadcasting. You have all the good casters, Hysterics, Munchables, these guys who have come out of that scene, who have been, trickling into Europe. Bunch of the people that have come up and now are casting in Korea came up through the LPL.
Even though fans won't know, because it's a bit of an old school reference. If you are an old school S5 fan, you will also know, friend of the show, one of our favorites, one of the sleeper geniuses of league thinking, Clement Chu, was the guy who ran the broadcast for many, many years.
Yes,
and was one of the main links, because obviously he can speak Mandarin, but to the Chinese community. Yeah, he was enormous.
So, there have just been so many of these personalities that have developed there. So it went to Australia, then it got taken over and sent to China itself, and it was run out of Shanghai. So people were literally living in Shanghai to cast this league. Then COVID happened, and it kind of had to be done remotely from that point in time. And as of last year, you guys will remember that there was this crisis because basically Tencent said, fuck this. We're not going to be doing this anymore. We're not paying for it. So what Riot did was, in an emergency situation, because basically Tencent just pulled the plug. And we gave Riot credit for this at the time. It was good of them to pick this up. They said, okay, we have our facility in Dublin, in Ireland, that, by the way, guys, they used to do a lot of the production work and the control room for LEC that's happening in Berlin. After they fired all those people from LEC, now the control room is basically entirely run out of Dublin. So they have a bunch of people at their Striker facility, which was built and designed to be a hub of broadcasting. Riot built another one of these things, although I think it's a smaller one, in Seattle. Right? And these hubs are intended so that you can have remote production crews doing stuff from around the world, right? They also did the control room for Worlds this year in Europe out of the Striker facility. And this was supposed to be the solution. Okay, it's kind of screwed up. Nobody's going back to China. Even though COVID, the pandemic, lockdowns have ended in China. Okay, you're just going to have to do it. Tencent doesn't want to fund this. We'll emergency fund this. And Oshin, the caster, who also did LPL, ended up being the producer of it this last year for Riot. He's Irish. He was working out of, as I understand, he's working out of Dublin, and he was helping produce this. They had to cut it to 5 days a week instead of the 7 days of broadcast, I think just for budgetary reasons, and also because if they were going to produce this thing, they needed to be able to, control the volume. Like 7 days was just too much, I think, to take in all at once, which again makes sense. If you're going from 0 LPL production on Riot's side to 100% 7 days a week, that's really hard, because then you probably need 2 different crews of people, because you're not going to have people work 7 days a week for months and months on end. So, it sucked, but at least, people were allowed to co-stream on the couple days that they didn't typically have broadcasts. And then we get to the end of this year. Okay, they finish it, and then Riot decides that they are just going to pull the plug on the LPL English broadcast entirely. And this obviously has huge ramifications, because it pretty clearly shows that, there's a lot of things that are implied by this move. First off, that Riot has ended its commitment to being there being an English language broadcast for all tier 1 regions. And that's a pretty huge commitment to end if you are wanting as a person to follow all of the teams around the world. It's much harder to do now.
And think about this, Monty. Remember, they always tell us even very recently, every single official Riot talk about like the future of League always infers they think it's going to be here decades from now.
Yep.
Bro, you've just killed the second most important league. And there's no LCS. Like, it just doesn't add up, does it, mate? Here's the thing. To me, it looks to me like what we've been talking about for the last year and a half, which is everything they're doing is moving to cost-saving measures where you have potential outsource everything and make someone else carry the cost. Like, you make someone else run it as a little shitty business or someone else do it on their course. And eventually, at the end, you're going to have no costs. You just min-max in the esports side, right? So, because as you say, Monty, it's clear at this point in time that, like, they're putting fuck all effort into the league side, and it looks like they've pivoted to Valorant and the new games, right? Or the forthcoming games, right? Seems like it.
And also, Thorin, another thing that people have may not put together with this is that Mark Z said that, get this, LTA South. So remember, we are supposed to believe that League of the Americas is one league with two conferences, right?
Sure.
So there's the North Conference, which is formerly LCS, and there's the South Conference, which is formerly CBLOL. But now these things interact. They are the same. That's what Riot's saying. It's the same branding. He has said that LTA South will not have an English broadcast either. So now half of
See, me, when it gets to that playoff point where they cross play, if I'm an LCS, a Northern fan, I'm just going, who the fuck is this they're playing?
Yes.
But that sounds like, you know what I said earlier, Monty, when I made that mad prediction on Four Horsemen, everyone's going to think I'm wild about. When I said, when the Southern Conference team beats the Northern Conference team, people will lose their mind. Well, imagine if you hadn't even seen them play and you thought they were literally just wildcard shitters from Worlds Pro. Like, this is going to make that even worse. If they ever actually get the upset, it's going to look like you've completely ruined the whole region.
So they expect us to believe that this is all one league. So if I'm going to use my Riot's favorite sports analogy, this would be like American sports fans, Riot employees. If you had an AFC that was broadcast in English and an NFC that was broadcast only in Spanish and Portuguese, and you're like, well, they're meeting in the Super Bowl. Who the fuck knows what's happening in the other half of this league?
And then even better, when the NFC team wins the Super Bowl, you go, what the fuck? Are they even good? Is the whole sport just shit? Yeah, that would actually ruin the whole thing, wouldn't it, mate? It's actually mental.
And not only that, but Mark Z also did the classic Riot, which is effectively to present a choice as inevitable, as if they don't have another solution. So what he did when trying to explain this, you'll love this, Thorin, was he said, well, what are we supposed to do? Just have Azael go to the studio and cast the games early in the morning and then do LCS later on? As if we couldn't get other casters, maybe up and coming casters. I don't know, because you can't do the LPL anymore. So maybe you should use English language up and coming casters on the LTA South, and you could do some kind of, let me get this straight, remote broadcast where those people were at least at home and broadcasting so that you would get English coverage over that region. Because, look,
by the way, as far as I know, Monty, isn't it the case that, like, South America, places like Brazil, have a time zone quite similar to Europe, don't they? I think they have like almost the same time zone.
It's 2 hours ahead of East Coast America. It's like halfway between. It's like halfway between.
So to me, even a remote broadcast will work from Europe again, probably from that same fucking Spriker facility if you wanted.
Yep. Sure would, because it would be in the probably early afternoon there, or late afternoon into the evening, right?
Yep.
But again, and what this says, guys, is like, again, if Riot was serious about caster talent, right? Which, remember, LPL has been the primary pipeline of caster talent in the history of League of Legends. Well, okay, you get rid of that.
What people get as well, this will probably a subtle point people will miss, Monty. One of the reasons is obvious. You're casting the best players in the world.
Yes.
So if you're awesome, we're really going to see it. Whereas the problem is, if you are casting like a random LLA game, I don't know how good the game is, so I don't know how good your shit is. So it's true. That's also why it's the ultimate breeding ground for talent, right? You sort of throwing potential people onto like amazing, and also that's a dream league to cast, Monty. All these action and team fights and crazy super import players is the dream.
There is no better league to get reps in than LPL for the following reasons in terms of caster development. More games. LCS casters have been doing like three best of fives a day, 2 days a week for years, or best of ones rather, 2-3. They do about, LCS casters do 5 best of ones a week on average, and they've been doing this for 10 years. In LPL, because they don't have a lot of casters, if you're doing your reps, you're probably doing 10 best of threes a week. So you're doing exponentially more games. Your growth is better. Like you say, Thorin, the games are higher quality, which means that it will either force you to get knowledgeable about the game or it will expose your weaknesses very quickly, right? And so it actually allows you to do things like analysis, which is not possible sometimes in LEC or LCS formerly, right? Because the teams are so bad that even if you are a good analyst and you are saying the things that they should do, they literally won't do them and they make you look stupid even though you're the one providing the good information, right? And so it's very hard to do it has always been immensely difficult to do real analysis, particularly in the LCS, because the teams are shit, okay? So that's another problem, but which it's solved by the LPL. You can know if somebody's good. And as you also allude to, Thorin, there's so many fights. There's so much action. As a play-by-play, you just have to go crazy. Like, it's going to be, because of the pace of the games, you will be exposed as a bad play-by-play caster very quickly because there's almost no downtime, right? It's definitely the fastest paced of this league, of all the leagues. So if you want to know that somebody's good, LPL was the ultimate place for them. And even if they had replaced LTA South with LPL in terms of English caster development, it would have been something, but it would have lacked many of the qualities that made LPL talent good. And I think Riot, we have to assume, Thorin, because they're cutting the English broadcast in LPL and they're not even replacing it with LTA South, that what Riot is doing ultimately is they're saying we do not need to develop any more talent. Because you tell me, if you are an aspiring talent and you are not currently signed to a tier 1 broadcast, how do you get discovered? How do you get reps at this point in time? Because if you're not big enough to co-stream, which you're not if you're an upcoming talent and get meaningful numbers, you're not going to get co-streaming rights, so you can't show it off. And also, co-streaming is inherently a different skill, and it's a different creative product that you're making than a cast is. So unless you're Nymira and Initialize, his brother, who were doing some of those LPL matches on their off days when there was no other broadcast to provide a similar experience. But how do you crack into that? How do you get recognized? How do you get reps? Are you just casting VODs as if they're live? That's never been a good indication of somebody's abilities because they probably have already seen the game, you know? So they probably have already heard other people talk about it. It's incredibly difficult. So what this means is that Riot isn't interested in developing casters anymore. Now, what does that tell you about League of Legends? That they're probably slowly phasing out the casting product. And on a long enough timeline, they are either going to move entirely to a co-stream model or, you know, they'll shutter LCK eventually, because why would they keep LCK around? We'll get into that. Why would they keep LCK English around? If they don't have to, it's just an additional cost. And if that happens, then they'll just shuffle around their talent into NA and EU, the people that they want to keep, presumably, and they'll just have a ton of people available on the bench in case there's spots that open up. And so co-streaming is basically what they're saying is the way of the future. Or, Thorin, they will just get rid of this problem entirely by giving the English language broadcasts to ESL and the Saudi government, which is the other thing. They'll just make it somebody else's problem at the end of the day. People are saying, well, Riot would never, ever do that. I don't think Riot's going to give up control over Worlds or MSI, but I do think that the day-to-day operations of LEC and LTA could easily be handed over to ESL and Riot would just oversee them. So,
by the way, as someone who's a commentator, I have a question for you. It's actually a question I asked Anders because, by the way, in a forthcoming episode of a talk show, he brings up the same point, like maybe Counter-Strike will become a core streaming game, etc., because so many people are doing it when they don't attend events now. So here's the problem I had, and I asked this to him, because think about this, Monty. One of the reasons why, even if you, a random fan, like to watch a core stream, you should want a main English professional style broadcast with sports style casting to exist is because, bro, almost every single iconic player is accompanied by an iconic cast.
Of
it's
course.
not just nobody. If I even asked Monty to this day, it's the most famous clip probably ever in League of Legends. If I asked a random fan who doesn't have the clip in front of them, what does Faker actually do? What order of spells? They would never be able to tell you, Monty. But I tell you what, they remember what are the moves, Faker, like that. That's the iconic part. By the way, it's the same in every game. It's one of the reasons why casters aren't beloved. They become a part of like the history of the game. So I also feel like you're going to massively miss out if there are no iconic calls. If it's just like I mean, I always do the ridiculous strawman version of it, but it is what Valorant is. Valorant is Tarek, who my joke is like you're just watching the game with your high roommate going, shit, that's crazy, man. Like, that cannot be an iconic call. Like, even though we all enjoy when they do the core stream little video where people react and go, oh my God, like, that's not a professional call, though. There's something about the way Anders or Doa or Sadikist or someone would have done it that gives it, funnily enough, the gravitas that makes it too super epic. It's not the call on its own. It's not the play on its own. It's the interaction of the two. The analogy I gave on the CS talk show, Monty, is it would be like making a Hollywood movie, but then going, who needs a soundtrack? Don't bother with the Hans Zimmer. It's like the Hans Zimmer soundtrack is what makes it epic. It's not Hans Zimmer on its own. It's not the film on its own. It's when the two collide and they're really awesome, like in a Christopher Nolan film, then it blows your fucking mind, doesn't it? So to me, I also think people don't realize what they're going to lose if we don't have a real broadcast doing this. Like, I'm even thinking of LPL clips now because I watch it in English. I'm thinking of all the iconic calls. Like, half those fucking, if people don't know, half of what made the Shy famous was people like fucking Dagda and Lyricals losing their minds watching him do the most crazy outplays ever that were never supposed to happen. It wasn't just even the play. So I feel like, because by the way, that is a thing about broadcast, even when you're an expert, we all sort of still need the cue, almost like the applaud now thing on the screen to tell us that it's actually super sick. It takes you a while for your brain to process how dope a move is. You sort of need the caster to tell you now is the appropriate time to lose your mind. This is mental. Like, I think people don't realize what we're gonna have such a fucking bereft esports history if we just now have 10 years of core streams. You know, like, it can't be, I'm sorry, it can't be Dom and Gilius going like, oh, he's fucking in. What are we doing? Like, that can't be the iconic call. I need like Dora or some professional to do it. Come on, Atlas.
It's also that if you don't have professionals to do it, there's a lot of other big negatives that come along. So for example, Riot loves holding these big stadium events. Whose voice is going out into that stadium? If you have bad people, the crowd's going to be way worse. I tell you that right now. Here's another angle for you. Sponsors. Do you think sponsors would like the iconic calls and the sound bites on the advertisements? Of course they do. That's what the boomers want. They want it to sound like sports. They don't want a streamer reaction compilation over a clip with everybody sitting in their little gamer chairs going, oh my God. That's not what anybody wants. It doesn't create a professional appearance. And here's the other thing that you may not appreciate. Casters actually have a different skill set. Now, you may love your favorite co-streamers, and I totally get that. But if you're a caster, the reason why people want to do casting, and I can tell you this as a caster, the reason why we love the art of casting is because it's about telling the stories of the game and the players. These are not replaceable people. You can't just have a new co-streamer walk in and know Faker's history. There's a value in the people who have been there the whole time, or the people who are willing to do the research and tell those stories, to set up the players properly and to correct the narratives and to set the table so the audience can have a feast. And the co-streamers are all watching this on their streams. They're reacting to the stories that are being told. Even if you never, ever watch the mainstream, you are still listening to the casters and those stories. And I tell you as well, those co-streamers are learning things about the history of the players and the teams from the casters that they're listening to, or at least the ones they're talking to. And if those people don't exist, poof, the history just disappears, guys. It just disappears. You cannot rely on a rotating series of co-streamers to tell the narrative of your game. If we didn't have casters, Faker's narrative that we all love right now would be 1 billion times worse. And that's just true.
To me, I think people don't realize how spoiled they are by people like Dom or Nymera, who are trying to actually do like core streams where they do give incorrect information and they do like follow the league and they try and be really fair. Bro, imagine two obvious aspects, right? Here's a very famous core streamer, Double Lift. Bro, he has literally repeatedly done core streams, Monty, where he says the dumbest possible take. Like, there was a famous one at MSI this year, Monty. When fucking BLG played T1 the first time at MSI, Doublelift, unironically, in game 1, was like, Knight just solo killed Faker. That's probably the best moment of his whole career. It's like, he's the reigning MVP of this tournament, you dunce. Like, that's the info a fan is going to get, Monty. They're not going to get some... when Nymera will do the opposite and be like, well, that's because on the Ari, he's playing with these runes that a lot of people aren't using, but on patch 13, you're not going to get that. You're just going to get Doublelift like, shit, I guess Ari's cracked. Like, you're just going to get nothing. It's going to be an head version.
And the thing about this, I'm not talking about Kadril's quality, but Kadril's by far the biggest co-streamer now, guys. And he was born in 1996. He was 13 years old when Faker won his first title. He doesn't know shit about like the early days of Faker, but there are people who are casters now who were there. Like, I don't always, I rarely agree with the way that Riot does casting assignments, right? By not putting Korean casters on there. But objectively, Kobe's been there the whole fucking time.
Oh, sure.
Right? You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, these
also, by the way,
stories
Kendrill
and
himself shows you, Monty, the difference between professional casting and core stream.
Yes, he can do both.
He was amazing on LEC. On the core
great.
stream, it's way more playing to the crowd, isn't it? Yeah, so it's a very different style.
Content.
Very different,
But he understands the difference between these two things. I think Hadjou was the best color caster, but he doesn't do that same kind of work.
Yeah.
You know, on his own stream. And it's gotten him great success. Like, I don't begrudge him for it. He's very entertaining in his own right, but you can see the difference there. And I really just think, like, in the long run, this is going to be pretty deeply felt. And Riot, I guess, just is very confident that the people that they have, basically hostage, by the way, because they are holding the casters hostage with their monopoly, because every time they cut one of these broadcasts, it's just like, you could be next, casters. Stay in your lane. You won't be getting raises. You'll take whatever we tell you and you're going to like it. Enjoy your pay cut in more days. Like, that's what they do. That's what Riot does. And these people are scared shitless.
Beatings will continue until morale improves. You know the slogan at Riot.
Yeah. These casters are so scared shitless because many of them have spent many years building up nothing of value on their own. Yeah. They have no escape plan, and they didn't negotiate for higher wages when it was good. So they've been on just the kind of like indentured servitude treadmill forever. They haven't built up, I don't think, much financial reserves in order to take a risk or to do something else with their lives. So they're just going to ride it down. They're just going to be on the Titanic until the very fucking bitter end. And Riot knows that. So, I mean, it's sad. I mean, it's sad to watch, right? Because I think a lot of these people are really skilled and deserve to be treated better. I obviously am very passionate about casting as an art form that I would like to see continue. Yeah. And I would like to see there actually be development pipelines for new casters, because the way it's structured right now, not only are you not, tell me what the way to get new casters is, because now nobody can make a living as a developing caster. If you want somebody to focus full time, I didn't even mention this, Thorin, but over the last few years, they've been cutting down the ERL broadcast. So all of the European tier 2 leagues have less and less and less casting. They've been hacking away at that. There's no LTA South broadcast now for English. There's no LPL broadcast
just
for
really
English.
Shocks me, Monty. In my game CS, by default, we have English on almost everything because it's all remote. It's just online if it's a smaller league. You're right. It's actually bizarre that it wouldn't even be an option to go online and remote. That's bizarre, mate. That you just go for it. Has to be in a studio or there's nothing. Like, what?
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.